another one down at the Apex, UFC Vegas 89. Only 11 more events till UFC Vegas 100. But this card was fun. It was a good appetizer for what we're going to be getting next weekend in Atlantic City. A lot more fans. But this card wasn't too bad. I did want to say before we start, because, we're talking about no fans in the arena. I just thought it was funny when Yusuf Zalal got his win that Paul Felder basically said to him, like, oh, it must stink when you get cut from the UFC and then you have to fight in a building in front of barely any people as he's in the UFC Apex, which was dead silent, as Yusuf Zalal yelled, Las Vegas! And got no pop from the non-existent crowd in the UFC Apex. And to be clear, not Zalal's fault. Just like, again, really unfortunate because he was pumped up and there's no thousands of fans to really hype him up and get him that extra little spotlight. But I just thought that was funny. I wanted to talk about it. So congrats to Yusuf Zalal for getting a win against Billy Quarantillo, because that was a good win, honestly, to come back to the UFC with. But let's get into the main event, because that was the big fight on this card at women's flyweight. Rose Namajunas versus Amanda Ribas, and Doug Rose gets her first win at 125 via unanimous decision, 249-46s and a 48-47. And I was kind of impressed by her in this fight just because I wasn't sure how she was going to look at 125. Granted that Ribas is also kind of a strawweight flyweight hybrid, but in this fight Rose was doing a good job switching stances, kind of like keeping Ribas at the end of her range and just honestly using her experience to counter well, and then using her grappling against Ribas, which I really thought was impressive considering Ribas's background in judo and jiu-jitsu. So what did you think of this win from Rose?
Yeah, my perspective of the whole weight class difference was that, it would balance out the striking difference between the two, with Rose obviously being the more proficient of the two, and in a way it did, but Rose is still just so technical anyways that she's able to still pick her spots while still not pushing forward so much that Amanda Ribas is able to get her to the ground and keep her there. And but it went both ways really. I think when it got later into the fight, it seemed like Rose was a lot more weary. It felt like a lot more weary of Amanda Ribas being able to if Amanda, when it came to the clinch as well, if it's going to be short range, then Rose has to really be wary of Amanda Ribas's grappling, and it worked out. Because our whole talking point, I think mainly when we were previewing this fight was what's out there for the both of them after this fight, depending no matter who wins. Afterwards, how much is this fight really going to propel either of them forward? And so I guess just judging from how this fight went, I guess clearly Rose still feels like she's got plenty to prove at 125, and rightfully so. I mean, obviously over a name like Amanda Ribas, that's a good way to stamp your mark and show that you still wanna get a belt, so you can't knock that, but it still did take all 5 rounds. Obviously it wasn't both of them had to still give it their all, and I mean, yeah, I guess at the end of the day they still gave us a pretty good fight.
Very close, like even stat wise. I think that's why
Yeah.
because I saw some people saying that they thought Ribas won. And like, I don't know, I don't really agree with that. Like personally, I had it 48-47
What
Rose,
I
but
think was I think if Amanda Ribas, I think if that last round for Amanda Ribas was a bit more decisive, in the sense that if she was way more dominant when it came to the striking and won that round just outright straight up, I think the decision for the judges would have became a lot more like difficult, and then things probably would have gotten a bit more dicey. But I think how I saw it was Rose kind of came away with 4 rounds anyways, and so definite
Yeah,
things.
I mean, honestly, I gave Rose 1, 2, and 4, and then Hebus 3 and 5. But the rounds that Hebus won, I don't think she won them very clearly. And even stat wise, like this, some people were talking about the striking numbers, but in round 3, if you're counting significant strikes, Rose outlanded Hebus, but Hebus outlanded Rose in total strikes. But then, like when you look at the percentages too, Rose landed 52% of her strikes in that round, and Hebus landed 36. So not only did Rose land more in terms of like actual significant strikes, but even without the volume, she was just landing at just a much higher percentage, and you can clearly tell that she was the one who was in control more so than Hebus, who seemed to really just land as much as she did because of how much she was throwing. But honestly, I was mostly impressed with the grappling because, like I said earlier, with Hebus's ground game, I mean, she has basically the pass with judo, and she's a jiu-jitsu black belt, and Rose did really well in the clinch against her, and a lot better than I honestly expected. I figured that this fight, if Rose was going to win, it was going to be basically only on the feet, but she did well on the ground too, and keeping her on bottom, and it was just really impressive, honestly, even though, like I said, Hebus isn't really like a full 125er, and technically the only 125er we've seen Rose like fight at the top is Manon Fiorot, who is obviously fighting next week, and Rose said that she wouldn't mind that fight, as well as Erin Blanchfield too, if Blanchfield gets the win. And she mentioned Macy Barber too. Basically anybody in that upper echelon she wants to go at, and I honestly really respect that. Like you kind of said, our initial point coming into this was, what is there really to gain for either of them? But I think the way that Rose was able to win this fight, and how well she's able to call her next shot and have a lot of options, I think that she did really well in and outside of the cage for this.
Yeah, and already being a fan favorite as it is. So.
Exactly. So like her giving the fans a number of fights to get excited about was a good idea for her marketing wise. And I think that the UFC will definitely consider any really of the options that she's bringing up, because I definitely enjoy thinking about any of those fights. But when I get to the top 5, when I think of Blanchfield and Fiorot, I think Fiorot is interesting just because their styles on the feet are so similar. But again, we've already kind of seen it. Erin Blanchfield, I don't think is a good matchup for Rose, but I also don't think she's a good matchup for really anybody.
I think that whole kind of call out is more just a relevant thing, like a relevancy thing, considering obviously that fight is literally happening this week now between Fiorot and Erin Blanchfield. So just
I mean, it gets her name in the title conversation, because before we're going into this fight with Blanchfield and Fiorot, it's a title eliminator, basically. Not officially, but you could assume that it is. But if Rose can insert her name into that situation, then people are going to have the conversation, because Rose is such a big fan favorite, like you said. I mean, Macy Barber is the other one that you can consider. I don't know how Rose would do in that fight. I think she has a better chance maybe in that one versus the other two.
Yeah, that too, considering Macy Barber, just got a win on a pay-per-view card. So
yeah, I mean, women's flyweight right now has been really fun to watch, and Rose adds a lot to that division in terms of star power, but also in terms of just her technical skill and experience in the sport at such a high level for such a long time. But I think everybody really in MMA enjoys watching Rose, and they like Rose as a person because she seems like the sweetest human in the world. But so yeah, we'll see what happens next with her, and I think everybody will be eager to see what's next. So from there, I think we should talk about Peyton Talbott, because this performance, man, was just unreal against Cameron Saaiman. TKOs him at the start of round 2 with just brutal ground and pound. But even before that, in round 1, when he hit him with that knee, dude, oh my God, I thought that was going to be the end of it. Shout out to Saaiman, honestly, for getting through that. But, I mean, Talbott, we've known this. He tends to start a little slow in fights, and they even mentioned it, I think, in the commentary. But in this one, he just came out of the gates firing on all cylinders, and he just looked so good on the feet, in the clinch, on the ground, against a guy in Saaiman who's another top prospect at 135 right now. And this dude, Peyton Talbott, just really seems to have like an it factor when it comes to watching his style. It flows so well, in all facets of MMA, and I think that this fight really was a coming out party for him. And I think not only me, but like everybody else, I think now we're really starting to see why there's so much hype behind him right now. But what did you think of the fight?
So that first round, I feel like I wouldn't knock anyone for saying that it seemed a lot closer than it actually was. But and that's also I guess a credit to Talbott already not being that fast of a starter. But it literally didn't even matter in the next round anyways. I feel like I don't know if his corner what his corner told him or anything like that, but maybe it was just like, hey, like you got him right where you want him, like just put him away here. Don't leave any crumbs on the plate, and that's exactly what happened there. And yeah, just like our preview went, like we knew this fight was gonna be fast paced and exciting, and that's not really as one sided as it was, but we're never gonna complain with a guy just going in there dominating for every second of the fight and coming away, and obviously just marking his name even more than he was already starting to. So that's definitely super exciting to see. At this point, it's like the UFC doesn't have like a list of names of people that shouldn't be fighting in the Apex and should be fighting in arenas on bigger cards and all that. Then they have to, and this is Payne Talbott's one of these guys that has to be on that list for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he's so interesting. I mean, like I said, when you watch him fight, it's so visually pleasing. He blends the martial arts together so well, and when you finish fights like that, it's so exciting. And I think that if you put this dude in an arena with thousands of people, it's going to be insane. So I was honestly super impressed by it, and like you said, I wasn't expecting it to be as one-sided, but really, anytime someone does something like that, you have to put an eye on it, and you're like, okay, that's pretty phenomenal. And Peyton Talbott is definitely a prospect that you all want to keep your eyes on at 135, because this dude seems like he's a little bit different. But the last fight we really want to talk about with UFC Vegas 89, and you guys will notice why I'm laughing in a second, but Igor Severino biting Andre Lima in the arm, gets cut from the UFC immediately after the fight, obviously. What a bizarre ending. I mean, I remember this fight was one of the ones I was really excited for. Two awesome undefeated prospects. And the fight was honestly shaping up to be a pretty fun one. That's why the bite came really out of nowhere. You got to wonder why he even did that. But then, obviously, Andre Lima getting the win via DQ. Initially, he's going to get $25,000 for the bite of the night bonus. And then when he gets that awesome tattoo, and then he gets another $25,000 for that. So it's crazy. Honestly, for Andre Lima, might be one of the better UFC debuts that didn't result in a normal knockout win or anything, because he basically won by disqualification and got a bonus as if he knocked the guy out. So that's a pretty good payday, if you ask me.
There's some strange stuff going on in this Apex, man. Talking about last week between Brian Battle and Losa, and now for me it's just the whole I guess principle of like what is the guy getting afterwards other than just like bad press, really, so in this case is obviously way worse off for Severino than Andre Losa, and like that's when you see things like this that are just so out of the blue, it's like it really, you want to feel like, hey, I feel like this has happened on an instance before. I just can't really put my mark on it, but it's like
maybe Mike Tyson, Holyfield.
Yeah,
that's the one that everybody
thinks
about.
Exactly, dog. It's like we truly like haven't seen something like this like ever, So I mean,
when I think of weird endings of a fight in the UFC, the first one that really comes to my mind, and this is like an old school reference, but Paul Daly and Josh Koscheck. Koscheck, for those who don't know, back in his day, really good wrestler, but kind of was type of dude who would lay on a guy and just minimal ground and pound. So sometimes like people didn't really like that, and it was very frustrating for Paul Daly. After the fight, Paul Daly obviously lost, and he goes, instead of basically shaking Josh Koscheck's hand, he throws a left hook at him after the fight, and then he immediately got cut from the UFC. So that's like the closest thing I could really think of. I don't know if I really remember anybody biting. Maybe in like the early UFC days when there were no rules, but I can't remember anything like this in the modern era, especially like from a guy who wasn't exactly doing bad. Like I get it if he was frustrated, but the fight was shaping up to be a pretty good one, and he was in control when he did it. Like that's what made no sense to me.
I don't know. I mean, it's just like not totally up to speed with how the rules work. You know, because once again, like the guy,
you think he wasn't up? He just didn't know that he couldn't bite people.
Yeah, dude. I don't because so from what I'm aware, like he's what 20 years old. So
yeah, but like. They gotta tell you that.
Like, yeah, I don't know.
Or maybe they don't. Maybe they're like, there's no way.
I don't know where he fought before this, but I mean, that's really all I can like kind of come to, I guess, in terms of why and how that even happened.
I mean, we've heard people, when they get into fights, sometimes people just see red. Maybe that's how he is.
I don't know if we thought maybe he could get through the rest of the fight without Lima, like I guess, really making it clear that he got bit, but that's
when you have a bite mark like that though on your arm, it's kind of hard to deny it. It was so weird, and like he looked so dejected after the disqualification. Like, what did you think was gonna happen?
That's
like,
what I'm
I've
saying.
never seen anything like that. I don't even know. Maybe he thought he was biting down on his mouthpiece and he wasn't, but that's like crazy. The way your logic behind it though might be the funniest thought I've ever like really had to think about. Like, yeah, maybe he just didn't know that he couldn't bite people. He's like, yeah, I don't really watch the UFC. I figured, right? He's like, I've only watched UFC 1. Maybe that's why Igor Severino bit Andre Lima. But we're joking around, but it does suck really for both guys because you never want to get bit in a fight on Andre Lima's side, but obviously he gets the bite of the night bonus, which is good for him. But for Igor Severino, I mean, he just ruined his career. You'll never see him in the UFC again, even if he never loses another fight. I mean, I brought the Paul Daly example before. After he punched Josh Koscheck and got cut, you never saw him in the UFC again, even though he did some good things afterwards. So, yeah, just sucks for Severino. Hopefully Lima in his next fight will have a chance to get, a real awesome UFC win. But this one will be something that we look back on probably years from now. No matter how their careers go, we'll be like, that was an odd night at the Apex. But, who knows how many more moments like that we'll see in our lifetime watching MMA. But congrats to Lima, though, for getting the $50K bite of the night bonus. And that is one of the greatest tattoos I've ever seen on his arm. But next week, man, the fight card, even besides the awesome flyweight main event, is just incredible. I mean, like we talked about, Blanchfield versus Furat, 125, title eliminator for the women. I would say the winner is probably going to fight for the title next after Grasso-Shevchenko. I mean, Rose kind of inserts herself in the conversation, but at the same time, do we really need to see either of these girls get another win before the title? Even with the tough stuff that's going on right now with Grasso and Shevchenko, I mean, I think that either girl wins this fight, they should be able to sit there and wait for the next title shot. So, but even besides that, Vicente Luque versus Joaquin Buckley in the co-main event, that's going to be a war. Chris Weidman is back, short notice, versus Bruno Silva. Weidman says he's feeling great, so hopefully we get to see something cool there. Virna Jandiroba versus Lupi Godinez, which is a very underrated women's fight. Julio Arce versus Herbert Burns, another one's going to be a war. Andre Petrosky versus Jacob Malkoun. And then, guys, it's Nate the Train fight week. And for anybody who's been watching the Hurt Handbook for an extended period of time, you guys know we love ourselves some Nate the Train.
Yeah, trust me, dude. I know the MMA space online, like they're all aboard the Nate the Train express. So
choo choo, man.
Exactly.
Choo choo. I'm here.
We're ready to go. We're ready to go.
And like in the arena in front of all these people, you talked about possibly having a list of names who should never fight in the UFC Apex. I think Nate Landwehr always needs to be fighting in a crowded arena because that's going to be insane. Win or lose, it's going to be insane, and we always know that with a Nate the Train fight. But this is going to be a really fun card, man. I mean, I know some people were sleeping on it, but there are a lot of good fights on here, and it's obviously in Atlantic City, New Jersey, represent. And we're going to try and do some different content this week along with the pod for UFC Atlantic City, so stay tuned for that. We're not exactly sure what's going to be coming of it, but we have a few ideas, so no matter what, you guys will definitely see something interesting. So until then, we'll see you.
Feels just like a superstar. Doing all these drugs, I don't think I'm gonna see tomorrow. Living fast, brand new dash up in a foreign car. It's the type of shit that you be doing when you gone.